I'm talking today to Tzippi Moss. Tzippi is a life and business coach and a holistic psychotherapist. Hi, Tzippi. How are you?
Good, Joanne. How are you doing?
Wonderful, wonderful. Tzippi, what I'd like to start off discussing is what is life and business coaching? How did you become involved in this, as well as the holistic psychotherapy?
That's an interesting question because I've been in this field now for almost 3 decades. It's hard for me to believe that it's been almost 30 years since I've begun. But actually the journey started back in 1983 when I got my degree in counseling psychology, and I began working in the field, and I was always naturally drawn to things that were a little different than the traditional therapies, things that were at the time called solution-focused therapy, some of the other kinds of therapies and tools that were really helping people make changes. And I love that about solution-focused therapy, and I would say that that's probably the precursor today to coaching. And I saw what got results with clients, and so naturally I kind of gravitated to that type of approach. And as I grew my business, and I began to focus on some of the issues that I have a lot of expertise in, and we'll talk about that in a moment, but one of them was money and business and things like this. Then I kind of naturally gravitated, in addition to life coaching, which of course focuses on all the aspects of a person's life, in addition helping small business people to grow their businesses, to clarify their visions. So I do some of both. And in addition to doing psychotherapy.
How is the coaching different from the psychotherapy, and what are the benefits of combining the two approaches?
That is a great question. You know, it's so interesting because maybe I'm going to earn a few enemies by saying this, but I do think that the coaching field, being a newer field than the therapy field, they've tried to define themselves as being very different. But I'll be very frank with you. I think that there are some differences. We'll talk about the myths of what the differences are. But in reality, there's a huge amount of overlap, particularly for the kinds of therapists and psychotherapists who are gravitating towards the field of, let's call it, positive psychology. Some of the myths, shall we say, about psychotherapy have been that it's only insight-based, that it focuses on people's problems from the past, that the people have an issue, a challenge that needs to be dealt with, and so the therapist is the expert more than the client. Those are some of the things that are often seen as differences, but in reality, I think there's a tremendous amount of overlap. And because positive psychology nowadays focuses on the fact that there are solutions, people do have strengths, people are basically whole. They have the skills within themselves with the right person to help draw them out of solving their own issues and problems. So I do think that it's more a matter of perception. I'm not going to say that they're exactly the same. Obviously, the training is different. And, psychotherapists and psychologists have to go through licensing boards. That isn't happening yet with coaching. The benefits, I would say, are you can sometimes get clients coming to you for coaching, and something comes up that's maybe out of the realm of what coaching would traditionally deal with, like a more deep-seated issue. And then my skills in psychotherapy, I've been trained in some of the cutting-edge things that help people deal with, let's say, traumas, like EMDR and brain spotting, and EFT is used today for all kinds of issues. It's wonderful for dealing with anxiety and issues of all kinds. Then I may lean more on those kinds of tools to help a person integrated within the coaching relationship.
Which I think is such an excellent point, because I always worry, you go for the coaching, but what happens when the coach discovers that the person they're coaching has some sort of, deep-lying issue, and is the coach qualified, therefore, to handle that problem?
Yes, I think you're so right, Joanne. Hopefully, a coach that hasn't been trained to deal with those issues, let's say the trauma is coming up and they have not been trained to deal with that, hopefully that kind of coach is going to refer someone to a therapist who has been trained to deal with those kinds of issues. But yeah, it's been a huge benefit for me. I will come first from the coaching orientation, if that's what the person wants and needs. But if things do come up, then I will actually discuss this with a person that we may be moving a little bit more to some other kinds of techniques that might be useful to them. And there are a lot of things like that.
And what would you say are the significant differences between holistic psychotherapy and conventional therapy?
I can only tell you what I say is the difference. I very much look at all aspects of the person. While you could say that my areas of expertise are the health and wealth types of things, I'm going to look at all aspects. I'm going to look at what's going on in terms of the person's physical well-being, what's happening with relationships, what's happening with their finances, also what may be happening, and they may not give it these words, but in their spiritual life. They might not call it spiritual, and I won't either. I'll use their language, but I'm going to make sure to look at them holistically because they are a whole person. And if I focus on only one area that's out of balance, and I'm not looking at the other areas that may not be in balance, then we've got a problem.
Can you tell me about a little bit about the different people that you help? Like what services do you offer?
Great question. Like I said, being in this field now almost 30 years, I've worked with lots of different kinds of clients, lots of different kinds. Probably it's best if I'm going to give you an overview of some of the kinds of services that I deal with. I get a lot of creative types that come to me, which is really fun. You know, the artists, the writers, academics who are doing interesting research. I would call them the high creatives. They are really, really fun to work with. And they may be coming in with issues that they're having problems, they're blocked in a project, or they're not clarifying their vision well enough for them. And then I really enjoy working with those folks and helping them. Actually, sometimes the block can be part of the solution, which is really fun. So that's one kind of person that I work with a lot. A lot of times I work with small business people, as I mentioned before, who want to grow their businesses or are experiencing financial difficulties. And then we look at some strategic work and also working with the finances, because money is a huge, huge thing that I work with people. And it's fascinating because money is a mirror of the person, and so by making even little tweaking, tiny changes there, it ends up having ripple effects on so many aspects of their life. And I'll give you an example of that. There was a woman, a lawyer that I dealt with, who had a very interesting niche. She was one of few lawyers in the country that worked in that area, but was terribly frustrated because she was not making good money. She said, I should be making 2 to 3 times what I'm making right now, and she had a lot of blocks around it. I worked with her using some interesting techniques. One of them was consulting with her future self and asking her future self how she got to the place that she got to. And we did some work also with the physical body, how she was carrying herself, how she was talking. And she came back about 2 weeks later and she said, you know, I was absolutely petrified initially to raise my fees. And the first time I did it, my legs were shaking. But then she began to ask for her fees and get them. And I heard 6 months later, she was making about 2 to 3 times her income, which is what she wanted, which was remarkable. So that was really fun. I also get people that come in with relationship issues. That's actually that to me is very exciting when I get, let's say, a person coming in who wants to get married and is so badly blocked in that area. And I worked with somebody I remember who was a woman who was so fearful of being physically touched, and she wanted to be in a relationship, and she clearly had issues here. And with her, I did some of the more therapeutic techniques like using EMDR. And a year later, this woman not only was in a relationship, she was getting married. You know, she invited me to her wedding. That was very exciting.
Wonderful.
Yeah. And a man that I dealt with as well who also very badly wanted to get married. And look, I think this is a problem of a lot of men, but he had it more so than most average men. He couldn't put his emotions into words. And this was driving all of the women he dated crazy. They would ask him a question, how was he feeling? And he would be tongue-tied. He didn't know what to say, poor guy. And the woman didn't want to continue dating him, and he went through thing like thing after this. And after working with him, I also, about a year later, got an invitation to his wedding. So those kinds of things are very, very satisfying. I also work, as I said, in the areas of health. So I've worked with people who are dealing with illness, either acute or chronic illnesses. And that's very interesting, too, because that's a real journey that you go on with a person and helping them focus on what in their life is still working, where are their strengths, where are their support systems, so they don't see themselves as just the illness, which is very easy to do when you've been diagnosed with something, or when you're hit by an accident and your body is suddenly, not what it was before.
And Tzippi, just as a final question, why do you think that the world of coaching, if we can call it that, has become so popular as opposed to conventional therapy?
Well, it goes back to the myths that I mentioned earlier about psychotherapy, that, let's face it, I mean, we've all seen the movies, analyze this, analyze that, and Billy Crystal was wonderful, but there tends to be the myth that if I go see a therapist, there's something the matter with me, right? I've got a problem. Whereas with coaching, there's none of that stigma, and you're going to go to a coach, and they're going to focus on your strengths, they're going to help you identify your vision, and so it's seen as a very healthy, strong thing to do. It's like the exact opposite, that people that are with it, people that are positive, people that are strong, are just wanting to get stronger. So it makes it much more easier to seek those kinds of services, I think, which is why the field is just burgeoning. And let's face it, coaches have done a lot of good out there for people. I think it's wonderful that the field has grown and that the focus has been more on what the person is doing right and even how to take their sabotaging behaviors and see even those as positive things, because there is always a positive benefit even in the things that are driving us the most crazy. And that's what a coach can help us to do, to figure out, well, what is that?
Thank you, Tzippi. Thank you so much for talking to me today.
Joanne, it's been a real pleasure. I've enjoyed it too.